Pregame.com.
The best rivalry in college basketball on ESPN primetime Saturday night. This is Brad Powers in the Pregame.com studios just off the Vegas Strip. We're talking Saturday college basketball action. It doesn't get any bigger than Duke at North Carolina.
North Carolina playing for a #1 seed. Who do you like?
I actually like the total in this one, and that's right. We're going to go with the under, and I expect there to be some value on the under. Let's call my buy price at this one at 161 or more. Why do I like the under here? Well, you got two very public teams in Duke and North Carolina. Often creates some value on the under. Why? Because the public loves to bet the over more often than not. And you look at Duke and North Carolina games recently, Duke 6-2 run towards the under. You look at North Carolina, 8-0-2 run towards the under. So why is this happening? Well, as the season progresses in college basketball, the public becomes more and more involved as far as the betting markets go. They love to bet overs, create some value, especially on these public teams. And when you got a high-profile game like this one, could be the most high-profile game of the entire regular season, that can lead to a little bit of line inflation. That's why I expect some value on the under. 161 or more my buy price.
Yeah, and when you talk about the public, very rare they get involved with totals, but this is a case where they will. They remember the first meeting that went over the total. They look at North Carolina, a high-flying team, Duke, a high-flying team. I imagine the ticket count be 8-2, 9-1 by the public in favor of the over, and that does have an impact this time of year when people are betting so much more money in college basketball in the marketplace.
Yeah, and they're also going to see a relatively high-scoring first meeting between the two teams. They combined for 164 points. But to get to 164 points, both teams had to shoot 53% from the field in that game. That was above their season averages, even though they're two great shooting teams. And you look at their defensive performances, that's well above the average as far as the two teams allow. So they're going to see that score. And even with Duke hitting 48% from their three-pointers, that game still, Fez, went under by half a point.
And I got to tell you, I want to talk side. I like North Carolina. I know I'm going to be laying 7.5, but I think that this was an aberration. The first meeting, I do think North Carolina is the much better team. They led that game at Duke, 64-59. It got away from them. But I still think the book on North Carolina, where I don't want to bet them, is when they're on the road against a team that mucks it up, a Virginia, a Miami. As long as the team is reasonably fast-paced and I get North Carolina home, I really think that that is their sweet spot.
Now, be careful as far as thinking this one's going to be a super fast-paced game. And series history says, it's relatively average scoring. If you look at the last 16 meetings, since 2010, average total score 149 points per game. That's just slightly above college basketball averages.
Yeah, big contrast, though, to the last game against Virginia, which I have to ask you about. It's such an outlier. North Carolina scored 43 points, not in the first half. In the game against the Cavaliers, how does that impact your handicap?
Well, normally when you got a team off such an outlier performance, the worst offensive performance for North Carolina the entire season, you know they're going to stress offense all week, and you'd expect a much bigger bounce-back performance. But if you've been following Virginia games all year long, I wasn't so shocked that North Carolina had one of their worst offensive performances. And I think a factor in our favor here is a lot of times what I've seen, teams after Virginia, and Virginia is a very physical team, both on offense and defense. A lot of teams, it takes a game or two after Virginia to get back into their flow.
Virginia is a game under monster. They're a first half under monster. Absolutely. Your second key handicap.
Well, let's look on why North Carolina's offense is so successful. They rely heavily on second chance points. They're number one in the country in offensive rebounding, and that tends to lead to them being in the top 5 in the country as far as efficiency goes. But a lot of times, Fez, they don't get great looks as far as their first shots go. Dave Malinsky on the Point Blank column has been writing about this all year long, that North Carolina, if that first shot doesn't go, the reason that they're able to be so successful, they get that easy putback in. Well, that's not going to be the case here. They're not going to get easy putbacks. They don't have that physical superiority over Duke.
Is it as simple to say as North Carolina doesn't shoot that well? If you can get the defensive rebounds, you can go ahead and shut that offense down. Can Duke do it?
Yeah, I think they can. The first meeting says that they can do it because that must have been a point of emphasis for Duke in that matchup. They actually out-rebounded North Carolina in that game. And again, I use this example. It's similar to football. Alabama, the reason they get defensive and special teams touchdowns is because they're physically superior to their opponents. But when they up their level, they're not getting defensive special teams touchdowns when they're playing Clemson. Same case here between Duke and North Carolina.
Let's make it official.
Yeah, let's make this one official. Pre-opener handicap expects there to be value on the under. The public, though, likes to bet the over. Duke, North Carolina is that rare game where the public can have an impact on the over, and it could thus cause some inflation as far as the line goes. And North Carolina's offense, very dependent on second chance points, some easy putbacks in. That's not going to be the case. They don't have the same physical superiority over Duke like they do most teams. You add it all up, we're going to go with 161 or under as far as the buy price. More videos at pregame.com.